Hello and welcome to the Addicts Anonymous podcast. I'm your host, Jim Rochelle. Today's episode 251, and we're going to be interviewing Victoria. How you doing, Victoria?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. You're joining us from North Dakota, you said?
Yes, I'm in North Dakota.
North Dakota. What's the weather out there today?
Well, it's a little bit nicer today. We still have a bunch of piles of snow that are melting, so I can't wait for that.
Well, you mentioned there might be more on the way, right?
Yes, man, that is it's no fun to be in the middle of spring and then still be having more snow coming.
Yes.
So for all of you that are more south, just know that one day I will be moving south.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Yeah, we were talking about Jersey. I mean, may not have to. You might be able to move east to Jersey because I don't know if we're going to get winters anymore. Last winter wasn't that bad. This winter was like nothing, but
Nice.
getting off track here. Let's talk about drugs and alcohol. So,
Yes.
first thing I noticed, you're a coach, which is awesome, right? You're a drug and alcohol coach.
I am, yes. Well, I'm a therapist in North Dakota, licensed therapist in my own business, Holistic Recovery Services. And, I really started finding the value of coaching to healing and healing addictions. And so I expanded into coaching as well. And I'm a healer. So, I even help folks heal that don't have addictions as well.
Pretty cool. Pretty
Yeah,
cool.
thank you.
So let's dive in here and get started. Like I was telling you before, I start every episode off the same. Tell me about your childhood. Let's go all the way back to the beginning.
All the way back to the beginning. Well, I had some different experiences that were trauma. I mean, I witnessed my mom get choked. I witnessed violence. There was
By your
alcohol.
father?
It was my mom's boyfriend, yeah, at the time. There was alcohol, he struggled with addiction with alcohol at that time quite a bit. And so, you know, I definitely woke up to him banging on the door trying to get in and drunk and screaming. And so, my mom left him when I was about 8 or so. And so, there was that loss. My real dad wasn't in my life. And then, my mom, she did the best she could. She tried to offer me a safe environment. She tried to she kept me in the same school. So there was definitely, efforts there that I recognized. I didn't recognize until later. There was a lot of anger and resentment. My mom had her own healing journey, and there was a lot of isolation. We didn't have other family members around. I didn't have very many friends, so I was spending a lot of time by myself as an only child. I spent a lot of time by myself and went into pretty severe depression pretty early, about 12 or so. I can remember the first times that it showed up. And so, my adolescence, I went through suicidal thoughts. Every day, I wanted to die. And by the time I became an adult, then, I had the choice of getting into some different things that were unhealthy.
I think I missed it. What age did the suicidal thoughts start?
About 12 or 13.
12 or 13.
Yeah, 12 or 13. Yeah. And so, yeah. And of course, this took years and years of healing and letting go of all of the resentment there. But just recognizing, that my mom did do the best she could. Everyone in my life, we're all struggling with our own generational trauma. We're all struggling with our own experiences and the environments that influenced us, right? And that we can always make a different choice. We don't have to follow the same environment that we were raised in. We don't have to offer that same environment to our children. We do have those choices, and they can be really difficult choices. They can be really hard, but we can change that for the next generation. So generous cycle breakers. That's the term that I've heard, cycle breakers, where we're, breaking the cycles of multiple different ways of generational trauma and generational patterns. So
How was your social life growing up?
yeah, it was terrible. I didn't really have friends much. And we didn't do anything. I had a couple hobbies at first. I played in band, and but I dropped those pretty quickly, especially when depression started taking over. So yeah, it wasn't really there. And I didn't have, in that sense, I didn't have exposure to drugs really early in life. I didn't have, I wasn't drinking and partying at a young age. Like I know that some folks, they start that pattern early. That wasn't the case for me. I was very isolated, so I was protected from all that environment until I was an adult. And then, of course, I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know how to interact in a social group if there was drugs and alcohol, and be confident in saying no and staying out of that. So
So you felt pressured a lot of times?
Um, well, there was more so my own codependency of not wanting to disappoint others. Not, there wasn't too much peer pressure in that sense, but it was more my own wanting to fit in and wanting to be accepted into some kind of group. Of course, reflecting later, it was the group that wasn't helping me be a better me, right? It wasn't a positive group. It was very toxic. So,
How was the stuff going on at home affecting you at school?
well, school, I was really good at being smart without having to study much. So at school, I got by, but I really didn't focus. I didn't pay attention. I slept in English for sure. I don't even remember any of that class. And so there was, but depression does that. Depression really, it stops you from wanting to engage in anything other than just wanting to sleep. Later, way into my 30s, I find out that I have ADHD, and so that's interesting. It was interesting to find out that I've been struggling and managing that without knowing it. But the more research I did, as a therapist, I definitely educate myself on more things about addiction, and trying to understand not only my own experience, but also how can I offer this knowledge and information to clients. And ADHD and addiction, there's a high rate. Not everybody with ADHD develops addiction. Not everybody with addiction has ADHD, but there's a definitely a higher rate, and it makes total sense, with impulsiveness and inability to focus and very easily distracted. I mean, those are all things that contribute to addiction developing and continuing, right?
Yeah,
So
I have ADHD.
yeah. So you know exactly what I'm saying.
I feel your pain.
Yep, yep, yep.
So, what was your first? So, you said there was drinking in the house. What was your first exposure for yourself? What was the first thing you ever did?
Probably marijuana was the first thing I ever did. And that was the first exposure, and that was in the house. Although it was by accident that I found it. My mom was really good at hiding it, and I would have never known other than finding it. So yeah, that was my first.
How old were you when you found it?
Oh, I'm gonna say probably 13 or 14, maybe.
So you knew to smoke it then. I was my next question was gonna be how'd you know what to do with it?
Right. Yeah. Honestly, I have no idea how I even discovered any of that info, but I'm sure that there was things along the way, you know, you just find out through friends, I suppose. And um, yeah.
How did it feel the first time you ever did marijuana?
Um, I guess I don't remember the first time, but I do remember that, you know, it was a way to escape. You know, and of course, that was after depression had already set in and suicidal thoughts were already there. And so that was a way for me to escape that pain, that constant pain that I felt. And that felt good. It felt good to have a way out, you know, a way out of that misery.
Yeah, that's what a lot of us do. It's all about numbing ourselves.
Yep. Yep,
I'm sure you see
exactly.
that a lot through your practice also.
I do, absolutely. And there's times where people don't really connect that yet, right? They haven't gotten to that place to really understand that that's what they're doing when they're drinking heavily on the weekends, you know, but they're still able to function. They're not connecting that they're trying to escape something. And oftentimes that can be um that awareness, just having that awareness can be a pretty big shift for them, you know, to realize that and have that information and knowledge. Knowledge is power.
Yes. Yes, I feel the same way. That's one of my big things I tell everybody.
Yeah,
Without knowing how things work, it's really, I mean, it's so much easier to work on yourself when you know the way your brain works, especially.
absolutely.
It's like trying to
Absolutely.
fix a car without ever looking at a manual.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, and you know, when you can have that insight into what's happening, you know, our subconscious is all of this that, you know, we think of our brain only able to process and use 5% of our brain at one time. But that's the conscious part. The subconscious is all the other 95%, and it's still working and functioning, and but it's working in the background. We become on autopilot. And so all of that stuff, that trauma, those childhood experiences, all those beliefs, all those values, the things that are in the background in that subconscious, that's really what controls us. Until we bring it to the conscious awareness, it's going to continue to control us. So when we have this awareness, when we have knowledge about who we are and what experiences, you know, when we look at our past experiences and we start thinking about them, we can very much come from this place of anger and resentment. But it is important to acknowledge what we've gone through, and it's important to think about how that has an impact on us. Um, it's that place, that middle place of seeing it and discerning that we went through this without blaming anyone else or ourselves. And that's where healing really happens, is when we can discern this is the experience, this is what happens, and I'm not blaming someone else or I'm not blaming myself for that. Because shame is one of the biggest triggers for addiction, relapse, all of it, is that shame. And so we have to be really mindful of not bringing that into the story.
Yeah. So for you, when do you think your addiction started taking hold?
That would have been after I started using Vicodin pills when I would say probably early 18. Um, that's, and you know, of course, you never know until later, right? But that's when I started taking those Vicodins recreationally. Of course, I didn't have a prescription, and um, and it just felt good, right? Like it, instead of, because marijuana was never really something that I really enjoyed a whole lot. But that was the first thing that really just felt good. You know, that gave me energy in the sense of a positive, happy energy. And so, yeah, that's probably when it first started.
And how did it progress from there?
Well, I suppose more things started coming around, you know, meth, cocaine, And so it was just at first, of course, it was experimenting, right? Just wanting to experience and know what it was like to feel that drug. And but then it's like it was all the time, right? There wasn't many days where I would not have something. And so, you know, pills, benzos, different things come along. And I think until heroin come around, it was just kind of like dabbling in everything. But like I said, there wasn't many days that would go by that I didn't have something that I was getting high on and using. And so until heroin come around, that's when it was like, okay, here's a preference, right? Like here's something that I really enjoy and that I want to keep around, kind of thing. And I did, you know, I got to a point where I was using needles and IV use to get the most bang.
Do you remember who the first time you ever used the heroin with was?
Who?
Yeah, who?
Yeah, it would have been my partner, my boyfriend at the time. So,
Gotcha.
and yeah, he, um, you know, and I didn't know, of course, until way after the relationship was over, but he had been into drugs even before I met him. And so I come along, you know, 18, trying to escape my childhood home, and find my own path. And I just, you know, I fell into that environment um, that just brought all of that into my life. And yeah, so that was most of my all of my drug life. At that time it was all influenced by my partner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The things we do for love.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it was. And of course it's not even a healthy love aside from drugs, you know, just the dynamic in of itself. You know, of course, and I can't, again, discerning, you know, I can't blame him. And you know, I can't blame myself, but there's just multiple dynamics that happen, multiple things that fall into place for unhealthy relationships to happen and to last. You know, I mean, I was with him for years, and uh until I got to a place where I was done and ready to be finding a different path, you know, finding a different way. I was stuck.
Yeah. So, at what age did you say, would you say it got like pretty bad, like effect? Well, how was your life? Let me ask you this first. How was your life outside of drugs? Like, were you maintaining a life? Did you have a job? Did you have friends? All that, and then the drugs were on the side, or were the drugs like taking over, and that's all there was?
Yeah, they took over pretty quickly. I was working for a little while, and then my partner was on disability, and so I ended up being a care provider for him. And so, um, I mean, at that point, we're just at home all day, right? Just doing drugs all day. So it was very quickly that it just took over, and was literally everything. You know, we might have had somebody come over here and there to visit, or you know, a friend, but most of the day was just sitting around doing drugs all day. So yeah, it took over pretty quickly.
What kind of thing? How would your average day go?
Well, we'd sleep in for sure. And, you know, using, I mean, we'd go get some food from the grocery store, maybe a couple times a week. But yeah, watch TV, you know, sitting around, listening to music, watching TV. I mean, it is literally, when I think about it, it's like there was no life, right? Like there, in the sense of um, anything that was productive or helpful for ourselves or anyone else, you know. And however, you know, at the same time, I had learned that there are many gifts that I received along the way in that journey, you know. For a long time, I rejected that part of my life. I rejected that part of my history, ashamed and judgmental, of myself at that time and my life and my experience. And even after I got my master's degree in addiction counseling and started being a therapist, there was still part of me that was rejecting that time of my life as the worst time of my life, or not as good, or pretty still feeling ashamed in some ways. And what I discovered though is that there's so much value that I really received from that time. And that's where I help people really shift their view of addiction. Is when we go through addiction, where it's a school, it's a life school, when we go through trauma and addiction. Because when we go through that, then now we have experience, we have empathy, we have that compassion for other people that are going through the same thing. And that's what it was for me. That was my education I needed in order to be the healing therapist that I am now. If I wouldn't have gone through those experiences, if I wouldn't have had those experiences of my whole entire life getting lost in drugs, then I would not have been able to sit here and offer my perspective and my compassion at the level that I can have it for others that are still struggling, and I get to help them. And that's a beautiful thing. And when I started accepting that time of my life and bringing that into my therapy, into my services, speaking my story, that's when my level of expertise or my connection with my clients really skyrocketed. When I was able to show up with my full authentic self and share part of my story that helps them in that moment, to realize that they're not alone and that they're understood.
Yeah, it's important to feel understood and that you're not alone. That's very important because I think one of the big things that most addicts, especially when you're going into treatment, is we feel misunderstood. We feel like we're the only one going through it. Nobody gets it. Everyone else is one way, but we're a different way. All of us addicts, before we come into recovery, think we're different than the other addicts,
Mm-hmm.
and that no one's going to understand us.
Yeah. Well, and treatment in of itself, there's very much like, this disconnect between the therapist and us when we're there. And and it's understandable. And I just want everyone to realize, like, there's a story that we bring when we're in those situations of like, oh, the therapist doesn't understand me, that's the story that we bring. And there are therapists that are judgmental. There are therapists that are coming from a perspective where they're not healed. And that's really the important thing, is that whenever you come across somebody that is judgmental towards you, or is making assumptions about who you are based on your experience or your choices in your life, including addiction, they haven't healed yet. They have their own story they're bringing to that interaction. It's never personal when someone judges you. It's always about them and never about you, but it doesn't feel that way, of course. And so I definitely encourage anyone that I talk to, that if you feel like your therapist is judgmental and you feel like there's some kind of energy that doesn't feel right, trust that. If it doesn't feel like you can trust that person and that you can trust that therapist, then find you a new one, because it's really important that you find someone you can open up to and that you can feel understands you in order for you to heal. You can't heal in a toxic space. So I definitely encourage people to also trust their gut and think about, how am I bringing my own judgment or my own story to this situation too? Because there's some of that where we just feel insecure when we are in a situation.
So, what would you say, moving on a little bit, what was your rock bottom? Did you have a rock bottom?
Yeah, we lost our house, or we lost our apartment. I had spent our $600 rent money on crack all in one night, all by myself. And so we got kicked out of our place because we didn't have the rent money. And I moved into my partner's parents' house. And I don't do well with having someone else's routine forced on me. So of course, that wasn't a place where I could thrive and really feel comfortable. And so that was my rock bottom. But I wouldn't say, um I don't know. I think that at some point it was just escaping the environment that was felt more important. I don't think even at that point that there was really recognition of how the addiction played a role into how things went. I think there was still just being stuck in a toxic relationship, because when we create a life that supports addiction for us, we have to change a whole lot of shit for it to allow us to be in recovery. We can't try to stop using in the same environment that supported our use, right? And so there has to be a whole lot of different things that happen in order for us to really thrive in recovery. And I'm not saying, though, that if you're trying to quit, that that you can't do it if you're still in a toxic environment. That's definitely not what I'm saying either. It's just going to be really freaking difficult, right? It's just going to
Yeah.
be really hard. So,
So what did you do to get yourself out of the darkness and towards the light?
well, I moved in with uh funny, the my mom's boyfriend that I had witnessed him choke her. He kind of was in and out of my life throughout my growing up. My mom would bring him in when there was something that she didn't want to discipline me on, or she didn't want to deal with. And so he was kind of there in different ways. But he helped me get through school. He definitely, offered me a safe place so that I could graduate high school. And so he was there at that time too. When I finally wanted to get out of that toxic relationship, he was there to provide me a place to go. And he was still struggling with his own demons. He was still struggling with his own addictions. And so it was like it was like coming from one toxic environment into just a different version of another toxic environment. And so there was very much this kind of trying to find a stable place that happened along the way. Sometimes you could just got to try again with some new, some different changes, right? Like maybe the change you made just isn't going to work out, and so you have to try another one. Just keep trying. That's the really important part, is that you just keep trying, right?
Yeah, don't give up. You can't give up.
Yep, exactly.
So how's life treating you now that you're sober?
Oh man, and it's so beautiful in now, in the sense of where I am in my healing journey. But like I said, for 12 years of my recovery, I was still miserable. I was going to school, I was meeting goals, I was doing things in life that were productive and great, and I was driven by this desire to make up for the time I lost, right? Like it felt like I wasted part of my life. And so now I need to like go farther and better to make up. And so it was very motivating in that sense of, the pressure, fire under my ass. But it was really miserable still, because I still wasn't happy. And all that pressure and judgment of being not good enough, right? I had to heal all of that mental health that was behind it. I had to, it wasn't enough just to be sober. It wasn't enough just to, make some change with my substance use or even my environment. It was my internal environment, my internal thoughts, my feelings about myself that really had to change in order for me to break free from all of those things that I was trying to cope, right? Because even after being sober from substances, there's food addiction, there was sex
Mhm.
addiction, there
Yeah.
was, all of these other addictions that come along. And don't get me wrong, I would very much rather have food addiction than drug addiction, right? Like, there's no judgment there. If you're in that phase where, food addiction has you, but drug addiction doesn't, then you're still doing great and you're still making progress. But that's part of the journey, right? Like, that's part of the journey that we go through, is that we keep making choices that are a little better, a little better, a little healthier here. And then we find our way into a place where when we look back, we're like, wow, that was quite a journey I had to go through. That was quite a transformation that I had to go through in order to really actually find the life that I love, that I'm happy to say I'm living, and to wake up appreciating all of it. And so that's really where I try to bring my clients into appreciating, the little bit of change that they're trying to make, and really focusing on that that those positive progression, right? Instead of it having to be perfect, tomorrow I'm everything's solved and resolved. It doesn't work that way. And so, when you judge yourself and you look down on yourself for some of the mistakes, even slips and relapses, when you look down on yourself for that and you judge yourself for that, you're just inviting more of the addiction cycle into your mind and into your heart. So, um, yeah, give yourself that love and compassion. It's really important.
Yeah, it's definitely self-love. Well, we have four pillars of Addicts Anonymous: self-love, discipline, hard work, and community. But self-love is the first thing, because if you don't love yourself, there's no reason to get better.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
first thing. Like, the only reason to get better is you want to help yourself, which means you obviously care and love about yourself.
yeah. Well, and that's the lasting change. That there's a lot of people that will change for their kids, they change for their partner, or they change so that they can keep their job. But none of those really stay very long, right? They never they it it's really difficult for those external things to continue to be a motivation for a really long time until you really find that internal self-love. And so, yes, love it.
So let me ask you this. One of my last questions for you. Well, actually, before my last question, tell me a little bit about what you're doing nowadays. How's your practice? Do you enjoy it? What kind of people do you see mostly?
I love my practice, and I got into private practice so that I could really just bring what I value in my services into my work. Being in North Dakota, I love it in the sense of, it's a safe place. It's been great raising my child here. And there's, it's conservative state, and so there's like that greatness about those old conservative values. And there are barriers to really getting some quality treatment because it's very much stuck in the abstinence only perspective, where the abstinence is the only way that you can find recovery and the only right way that you find recovery. And I'm a harm reduction therapist all the way. And so when I was working in the field, for other agencies and for other therapists, then it was really challenging for me to be able to bring that harm reduction therapist in an environment that doesn't understand it, right? It doesn't understand the values of harm reduction and how that can really help a lot of folks. It's not for everyone, right? Just like abstinence only isn't for everyone, and harm reduction isn't for everyone. Um, and so being in private practice, there's just all of that freedom to really bring what I feel is important, the values that I feel are important to my clients, and to create a practice that really values my clients' individuality. And of course, being a coach, you know, I have even a little bit more freedom with that, and bringing in that holistic healing perspective. That's what really made the difference for me, because I know that every client I talk to, um, even teaching them how to take 2 minutes to meditate, it can be life changing just to learn that. And so I know that I'm making a huge difference, and it
Absolutely.
feels soul, my sole purpose was to connect these two perspectives together in treatment and really support that for the world. So.
Meditation saved my life. Absolutely. I meditated once or twice in rehab, and then when I got home, I had a book that I had bought years ago called How to Meditate. So I started reading it, and then it mentions Buddhism, and I was like, you know, let me get a. I remember I got a book, Buddhist for Beginners, and
Yeah.
started talking. Yeah, and then from there, it just progressed, and I'm a huge fan of the Dalai Lama now, and I love meditating. I need to do more of it. I've been falling off lately, but it's amazing how it centers you.
Yep.
It really does. It really does. It can really help, especially with recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. And grounding, you know, if anxiety is something that, or trauma, you know, the anxiety that you can get from traumatic experiences, grounding is really important. And that's really that energy work, right? Like that we are energy body, and we have so much energy that runs through us, but when it gets stuck, that's when we start having problems like addiction, for example. There's a lot of in that root chakra, if anybody's familiar with the chakras, the root chakra, when that's closed off, then oftentimes addiction is one of the first signs. Well, not the first sign, but that's one of the signs that it can be closed off. And then you know, those bottom three is really related to addictions, because the solar plexus is our seat of power, power, personal willpower. And then the sacral chakra is our creativity and emotion center. So, you know, if we are stuffing down our emotions and we're pushing them under the rug and we're not feeling what we're experiencing, then that's going to be closed off, and that's associated with those addictions. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
It sounds like you're doing super awesome nowadays.
Yeah, you know, it's very much it, like I said, it's my sole purpose, right? To bring this spiritual perspective for people's healing addictions. We, you know, one of the really important things that I bring is, we often, this disease model, medical model of addiction is that we're stuck with it forever, right? Like we're just managing symptoms, we're going to manage symptoms for the rest of our life. But it doesn't have to be that way. We manage symptoms for the rest of our life if we're not healing all the reasons why we had developed a coping mechanism, right? Because that's really what addiction is just a way to cope with pain, a way to cope with misery, a way to cope with mental health and trauma. And so, you know, we can heal addiction. We certainly can. And we're not focusing all on the substance. We have to heal all the reasons why addiction developed in the first place, and continue that journey of self-healing for addictions to resolve themselves.
Well, it sounds like you got good stuff going there. It sounds like you're helping a lot of people.
That's the goal. That's the goal.
So you already gave us a bunch, but I'm going to ask you one last time. Do you have any additional advice for people that are watching and listening?
Mm, nope. I think that we covered quite a bit. You know, I think the last piece of advice is, if it doesn't feel like an environment that makes you feel better when you leave, makes you feel happier about yourself, makes you love yourself a little more, then it's not the right environment for you. And it's really important to trust your energy and your instincts on that. You know, sometimes you have to be a loner for a little while in order to find the space that's going to help you heal and help you thrive. And that's okay, because that lonely place allows us to go inward and really connect with ourselves and be our own best friend. Loneliness can allow us to find a way to be our own best friend, and that's really the best environment, the most important environment is what's in our heart and in our mind.
Understood. So, did you have anything else you want to throw in?
Nope, I think I have said all that I wanted to. I really appreciate you letting me share my story and letting me share some of the wisdom from my own experience that I can share with others that are still in their journey, since we all are still in our journey. So I really appreciate this opportunity to share.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you coming on. You did an awesome job. I think it was a great interview. How do you feel? Feel good?
It feels fantastic. It feels
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, I hope, and I know that the purpose here of us doing this together is that it's going to help someone, and even if it helps one person to find a little bit of peace in their heart, it was all worth it. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you again.
absolutely.
All right, do me a favor and sit tight where I do while I do our little sales pitch for the group. And for everybody watching and listening, if you like what you saw on her, go below and give us a like. Also, subscribe to see when we upload new videos. You can check us out on all social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, TikTok, Instagram, you name it. We're most likely on it. I also suggest checking out our website, www.addicts-anonymous.com. There's plenty of free resources as well as free literature. You could check out our 10 steps there as well. Addicts Anonymous, I've mentioned a few times, also has a book coming out. I'm going to stop announcing dates because it keeps getting pushed back, but I will keep everyone posted on that. So that's really all we have for today. I really hope everyone enjoyed it. And until next time.